the island of Leyte, the Philippines, where people live in the beautiful surroundings of nature. This lovely island, however, provides numerous hotbeds for a dreadful endemic disease called Oriental Schistosomiasis, or snail fever. These brothers here, 13 and 11 years old, are patients of this disease. Disturbance of growth and development, and ascites, enlargement of the liver and the spleen, chronic gastroenteric disturbance. In addition, anemia. Medical care is given at various medical institutions, but the doctors can do little more than alleviating the patient's present conditions because of no specific drugs against the disease. In Leyte Island, there are over 90,000 cases of this disease, which covers almost 1/5 of the population. And the total human cases all over the Philippines are estimated at more than 500,000. This disease has spread not only in the Philippines, but also in Indonesia, Laos, Thailand, China mainland, and Japan, with an estimated total of 40 million cases. The causative agent of this disease was first discovered in 1904 by Dr. Fujiro Katsurada, a Japanese physician who named the worm Schistosoma japonicum. This caused a popular misunderstanding abroad that Japan was the original place of the disease, rather than the home of studies on this subject. Normally, adult male and female worms embrace each other, looking like a single worm. When separated, it is said they may be undergrown. Here we can see many eggs in the uterus of female worms. The adult worms live in the mesenteric portal venous blood vessels, feeding on the blood from the host. The female worms, when laying eggs, migrate to the radicals of the superior mesenteric vein, draining the small intestine. Our camera has caught sight of egg laying. There's a blood vessel choked up with eggs. This is a specimen of worm in a blood vessel close to the intestine. This is a cross-section of the intestine. You can see eggs coming out into the intestinal lumen, passing through the blood vessel. Here, these eggs can cause intestinal abscess, resulting in dysentery and high fever. And the eggs trapped in the portal radicals can develop a serious case of liver cirrhosis. Even more serious are cerebral cases resulting from granuloma formation around the eggs trapped in the brain. The patients suffer throughout their lives from cerebral manifestations such as headaches, convulsion, and paralysis. The disease infects not only man, but various mammals such as dogs, cats, pigs, water buffaloes, rats, field mice, cattle, and goats. These animal hosts will become transmitters of the disease. The route of infection is so complicated. The eggs, deposited in the lumen of the host intestine, are excreted through the feces, which the rain may carry into water puddles. The eggs can be hatched soon after reaching fresh water. The larva, just hatched out in the water, is called miracidium, which is covered with ciliated epithelia. The larva at this stage is not yet infective for mammals. It must first find an appropriate snail, a necessary intermediate host in which it will grow. In the Philippines, the snail intermediate host is a tiny freshwater snail, biologically termed Onchomelaria quadrasi. These snails live either in water or on the wet or moist surface of the soil, feeding on rotten vegetables and minute algae. Meanwhile, the hatched miracidia swim about in water, seeking their snail hosts to penetrate through the soft part of their bodies. In the snail body, the miracidium transforms into a saculate sporocyst. The sporocyst, in turn, produces in its cavity the second generation of sporocysts, called daughter sporocysts. Cercariae grow in the daughter sporocysts, out of which they escape through birth pores. These processes take place in the snail body. One morning, 2 to 3 months after the penetration of miracidia into the snail host, several hundred cercariae produced from a single miracidium begin to emerge from the snail. The body length is about 0.2 millimeters. With suckers and 5 pairs of penetration glands, the fork-tailed cercariae are moving actively. These cercariae are waiting for a chance to come into contact with a human or animal skin in slow streams, swamps, and paddy fields. The SCRP penetrate through any part of the skin, discharging proteolytic enzymes from the penetration glands. While penetrating, the SCRP cast off their tails and transform into schistosomules. After penetrating the subcutaneous tissues, the schistosomules enter the venous circulation, which carries them through the heart to the lungs. At this stage, the mouth has not been developed yet. By the time they reach the liver a week later, the schistosomules begin to feed on blood cells and plasma there. The schistosomule continues to feed on highly nutritious blood from the host and grows rapidly day by day. The worms still keep on feeding, growing, and migrating into the mesenteric veins. Within a month and a half, the worms begin to mate and the female worms produce eggs. At this stage, the patient begins to suffer symptoms of anemia and malnutrition. Water and the host snail are the essential media in the life cycle of the parasite. Man gets the infection when coming into contact with water, but man cannot live without water. So the most effective control measure for this disease is to attack the intermediate host, thereby interfering with the life cycle of the parasite. In Japan, too, this endemic disease had once raged in 5 districts, including Kof Basin, until 1960s, when it was controlled almost completely, and the total number of egg carriers were drastically reduced. Now there are only 600 estimated cases. This miraculous success is largely due to the people's active participation in the control campaigns. Let us say, for example, the clearing of vegetation in and around the snail habitat, and the spraying of molluscicide have been carried out voluntarily by farmers. Meanwhile, a large-scale rearrangement of arable land and cement lining of irrigation ditches inhabited by Oncomelania snails has been greatly instrumental in reducing the snail population. In the Philippines, the National Schistosomiasis Control Program has been in progress since the 1950s in cooperation with the World Health Organization and other international agencies. The medical cooperation in schistosomiasis control between the Japanese government and the Philippine government started in 1972. Since then, it has already achieved some notable results. Efforts have been made to develop a simple but accurate diagnostic procedure, such as circumoval precipitating test, or COP, which can be locally practiced. There is also research being conducted on molluscicides to be produced from plants locally available and appropriate for a self-reliance program. People here are engaged in studies on electroencephalography in relation to cerebral disorders. Due to irregular boundaries of rice fields, watercourses wind through the fields, so they do not drain well. Luxuriant aquatic plants such as lumbia intercept the streams. But the people here do not want to cut down the lumbia because the leaves of this plant provide good roofing material. So stagnant pools with overgrowing aquatic plants create a paradise for snail and SCRP. A number of swamps border the paddy fields here and there, so even a little rain helps the SCRP to move about freely. In these areas, the climate is generally warm and humid, and the soil is wet, resulting from the frequent rains. These provide the snails with favorable conditions for rapid growth. Accordingly, there are more patients in rainy areas. In addition to natural conditions, there are some points to be considered. For example, early education of children on hygienic care. Like anywhere else, we can expect a good result by encouraging young school children to learn about the importance of sanitation. In remote rural areas, instead of using their own toilets, some people still observe old customs like defecating in the nearby bush or fields. In this way, the eggs in the feces can be scattered around. Construction of water-sealed toilets is one aspect of the government's efforts to combat the disease. But it may take a lot of time before people in the villages will get used to their toilets. In fact, some people still find it more comfortable to defecate in streams while bathing in the morning. But there is a greater chance of getting infection while bathing in streams. And yet, man cannot live without water. All in all, the prevalence of endemic diseases such as schistosomiasis can be controlled and prevented, largely depending upon the efforts made in accordance with the socio-economic conditions of the community and its environment. Here is one of such efforts being exerted in the form of technical cooperation between the Philippines and Japan in river conservation works. Improvement in environmental sanitation, health education, and change of the mode of living. Any of these will take a great deal of expense, time and patience. International cooperation is essential, but no less essential is the people's awakening to the situation, in which they actually take part in this laborious campaign to eradicate the dreaded disease, not only for their own happiness, but also for their children and their children's children.